Afternoon, Paul. In the media, we always talk about measuring stick type of games or series. Can you talk about a little bit about your team's approach to this week's game and what it might take to try and narrow that gap between your team and theirs?
Yeah, I don't think we do, right? Like, I think you're so much more focused on your life and your journey where you're at. So the new experience for us, we had a real tough game. And now we want to come back and get on the right track again with the full awareness that, we're going to go see a real quality team. Over the course of the year, you see that a lot, right? Every time you play a team that's one or two in each division, you know that you got to be at your best to beat them. Um, it's different this year because there's only one first place team that you see, and you're trying to chase them. So I don't know. In terms of measuring stick, I think we look at it when you'll come to the rink. The other team has some really, really high end guys on their team, and you've got to be at your best to beat them.
We'll go next to Michael Trakos. Go ahead, Michael.
Hey, Paul. I'm just wondering, in terms of how you guys match up against the Leafs, is it an easier matchup now that you've got Pierre-Luc down the middle, where you can throw something at the Dubois line, and then you can also throw something at the Matthews line with Mark Schiffer there?
I think so, Mike. If you looked at the past, what we would do, and it had more to do with the youth on the wing, is that we would run Lowry second off the bench. Right. So he'd either get Matthews or he'd get Tavares, whether you're home or the road. Or if you're on the road, you force their coach, if he's hard matched and he doesn't like that match, to put either Matthews or Tavares off the bench third. And most of those guys don't like coming off the bench third, right? They want to get the game they want to play. What is different for us this year, and it's not directly related to Pierre-Luc being here because we'd had Brian Little here for a long time, who's a veteran guy. Our wingers are a little bit more mature. I think that's what you see with the Toronto Maple Leafs as well, right? That high end that they have isn't 19 and 20 anymore. They've got some years, so they've got some experience. So the matchup game for us is almost less important than it has been in the past, and I kind of feel that way about Toronto. I think seemed early on Matthews came off the bench third an awful lot, right? They were looking for an advantage with that. And then as in the next year, as he gets older, a new coach comes in, the guy's a little older player. Now he's off the bench first. And that's the normal progression for these young players. So I don't get the sense, again, I don't watch Toronto nearly clearly as much as you focus on your own team, that either coach is really hard tied to a match.
We'll go next to Mark Swolinski from the Toronto Star. Go ahead, Mark.
Hi, Paul. Nothing is ever guaranteed for an NHL coach. It's a very hard job. You've coached in Toronto, and I'm just wondering, you're one of the longest tenured coaches in the NHL. What can you look at back on Toronto coaching here as perhaps a building block to your entire career, and maybe what you learned from here?
So my first 8 years or so, Hartford, Carolina, I think was more an education in the NHL game, just learning the systems. And then my 2 years in Toronto was an education in all the things around the game that impacted. Certainly the scrutiny, the pressure, the media involvement, and how people react to that, how players react to that. And then how the coach has to be, buffer may not be the right word, but certainly a gatekeeper in terms of what I introduce in the media. That old adage, never introduce a negative. Somebody's going to do that for you. So you learn some things about being around the game, which help you prepare for your next tour in Canada, your next Canadian market. And then I feel, maybe I'm wrong, but as I've gotten older, I'm far more, boy, I'm going to get called out on this one. I think I'm friendlier. I'm less guarded with the media now than I used to be. And part of that is the Toronto experience, right? You just get overwhelmed by the number of questions that you get, the scrutiny, the opinion, and you get to a point where you realize that, you do your best, answer the questions as best you can. They're people too. They got jobs too. They're just, you don't take it nearly, I don't take the media maybe nearly as personally after I got out of Toronto. I learned that.
We'll go next to Kelly Moore.
There's 6 guys in this call shaking their head going, he's full of it, man. He's not nicer to the media. I actually think I am.
We'll go next to Kelly Moore from CJOB. Go ahead, Kelly.
God, I never thought I'd live to see the day that I'd say thank God for the Toronto media. But Paul, what have you seen from the first 3 games with Pierre-Luc Dubois, Kyle Connor, and Nikolai Ehlers? Because I know when you acquired Pierre-Luc, there was the thought that that was the perfect line for him. And many of us surmised that as well. So have you seen enough to continue on with that?
Yeah, I'm more pleased with how the 3 of them interact than I thought I would be. So we will look at these line and we're going to look for points, goals, and assists. And it's going to happen, right? Those guys are going to put up numbers. They're 3 skilled players. What I didn't know or fully appreciate is how good Pierre-Luc's defensive center instincts are. So the thing that happens in the first 2 seconds of a read in the D zone coverage is almost instinct, right? If they're wired to think of the game, is he cheating and trying to get ahead of pucks? Is he poaching on pucks to try to break something loose, or is his first 2 seconds of that instinct coming out defensive? And I'm really, really happy with that, which means, so neither Kyle Connor or Nick Ehlers broke into this league as defensive guys, right? They're high-end offensive guys. Kyle's kind of done a bit of both, but we need a centerman in the middle of those 2 guys that can defend, that can help us spend less time in the defensive zone, especially when things, and you're going to see this in our next 3 games. Toronto is so dynamic in the offensive zone. There's some higher end reads, and we think that Pierre-Luc has that ability.
We'll go next to Jeff Hamilton from the Winnipeg Free Press. Go ahead, Jeff.
Hey, Paul, you got a 3-game set here, but I'm sure you guys are focused on the first one here. You kind of mentioned after last game, the teams that were above 500, there's a reason why you guys don't lose 2 games in a row or very often. Same reason, Toronto Maple Leafs as well. They're coming off back-to-back losses. I think the last time they did that, they won 3 straight and 7 of their next 8. So with a game that's already going to be pretty highly anticipated, what are you expecting from that first game, just given the week or the days leading into the game that both teams have faced?
Right. So I think that, and again, I wouldn't say that I've watched the Toronto Maple Leafs play as much as any other team, right? So not more or less. But I think that both their team and our team have made real improvements in the last month, like just from training camp to now in the style of play, right? So when you look at Edmonton's games against Vancouver, their games against Edmonton, Toronto's games against Edmonton, they were really structured well, I thought, in those games, right? For a team that's noted to be kind of high flying and certainly had that ability, that wasn't the foundation of their game. And it was there to advantage. Those were grinding games. They were close games, didn't go their way. And I think that's true of our team as well. The game that we played in here, boy, they outshot us badly, especially in the second period. And they worked inside us, and they kind of taught us a bunch of really good lessons about supporting the puck and being smarter with the puck. Now, you can pull video from the last Montreal game and say we hadn't learned any lessons. But in the block of games that we've played since then, we've been a pretty darn good team. And we did most of that without Pierre-Luc or Patrick at the time, without a top-end guy in our lineup. So it's going to be a test. So I'm thinking in this first game, the test here is which team has come farther along in limiting the other offensive players. I think that's going to be what will be on display. I still think both teams are going to get their chances. They're both going to generate. It will be who can control the other team for the longest.
Well, next to Paul Friesen from the Winnipeg Sun. Go ahead, Paul.
Hey, Paul, just curious what it's like taking a team bouncing back from a 7-1 loss compared to, say, a heartbreaking late goal loss. Any difference in the mood?
Yeah, I think there is those tough losses at the end of the game. It just feels like you spent, you did 58 minutes of good things, and there's a huge cost, and it was a disastrous end. And usually you have 1 or 2 players that are really feeling it more than anybody else. The guy that missed his check, the guy that made the turnover, right? That's tough for him. I don't know, Paul, that I've ever seen a game where every player was minus. And I don't know in 25 years that I've ever seen that. So we have this nice, and 2 goalies played. So we have this whole thing nicely spread out across the board. And we've got something to prove that wasn't our game. So it is a different dynamic. We had a good, sharp practice here today. not casual by any means, and certainly not arrogant by any means. There wasn't anybody, hey, it was a one-off. It wasn't handled like that. We got to go to work today, but there wasn't any, players aren't screaming at each other, or there weren't any fights. It's not that kind of intensity level after a tough loss, right? I think we've handled it right. It's probably, you never say it's a good thing, but we know our opponent's very strong tomorrow, so that we're going to have that edge coming to the rink. We're going to shake that. We're going to get rid of that last game, and we know they can do that by proving it in our play in the next game. So I'm thinking we'll have a pretty darn focused group tomorrow.
A couple more for Paul. We'll go next to Sarah Lesky from TSN. Go ahead, Sarah.
Paul, just what was the emphasis for you guys in practice today? And are you planning on going with the same lines tomorrow of what we saw in Montreal?
Yep, we're not going to put one OB. We're not changing our grip. We've been pretty good. We did the main focus is kind of we wanted to get to some 5-on-5 banging today. Like we got up and down the ice. We had a day off yesterday. It was speed first, some puck movement second, and then we got to 2 to 3 fairly heavy 5-on-5 drills where we're looking for just some positioning in terms of what we expect from them tomorrow night. And a lot of it was just getting back to our basics, right? Reset a little bit here. We had no new drills today. It was all drills that the players knew so that we could go fast. And, we had a couple of wrinkles in there about something we were talking about offensively, one thing defensively, and away we go.
And final question to Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet. Go ahead, Sean.
Thanks, Gregor. Hey, Paul. When you were talking to Jeff about that answer and, trying to see, which of these teams are going to control the other team throughout the game, that's the real test that you're looking for. Paul Stastny had talked about how, and it reminds me of the way your players were talking about Edmonton, about how they can be fun games to play because there's so much talent and you can really kind of get into that back and forth high flying hockey. Those two styles sound like they clash, but I guess the question is with Edmonton, and I'm guessing you feel the same way about Toronto, what is it about those teams that they can kind of bait you into or get you into playing that high flying style of hockey?
Well, I think that's coming out of both our teams' game as a foundation. I think that's a function of youth. When you get really skilled young players that come into the NHL who really don't know anything about defending, you see that. And then I think both teams, and that would be very true of Toronto's games against Edmonton, are coming out of that. There's a maturity coming in. There are times not to make a play, and it takes a guy a little while to figure out that, I don't have to display my God-given talent every time I touch the puck. Matter of fact, it's detrimental to the team cause. There are games in the NHL where you go play a team that's almost totally defense first, right? Every puck gets dumped, every check gets finished, every shot gets blocked. They're not going to press the issue, but that's a real grinding game, and it's not much fun for some of those forwards to play because you're not going to touch the puck very long. You're getting hit every time. It's not a lot of fun. The best teams do both, right? The teams in the top 10 of the league are going to grind you. They're going to play hard defensively, and they're also going to generate offense. Those are the most exciting games, and you want to be careful about coming to the rink going, this is going to be fun because we get to trade chances. When you lose that game, you're not very happy with your performance, and when you win it, you don't get as much out of it as you think.